Let me tell you, I knew it was going to be a weird day when the sheriff pulled up and there was Judith Renner, the self-appointed queen of Sycamore Dunes. HOA, perched on my cabin roof in a wedding dress, screaming into a megaphone about some ancient treaty and waving paperwork like she was laying claim to the Louisiana Purchase, except her property was my place, not hers, and her ancestral rights started and ended with whatever suburbia fever dream she'd cooked up the night before. She'd zip-tied an HOA sign to my chimney spray painted, "This is Karen Land" in neon pink all across my logs, and honestly, the only thing that matched worse than her paint was her sense of reality. Because my cabin never was and never would be part of her HOA, no matter how many fake documents she whipped out or how many times she invoked the founding fathers of suburban development. Yeah, that happened. Now, Sheriff Tom Bradshaw, bless him, was standing down below, radio in hand, face locked in that look you get after 10 years of dealing with a world-class neighborhood menace. He called for backup, not because Judith was dangerous, but because everyone knew it took 3 people and a strong back to get her off a roof, especially when she'd decided her cause was sacred property lines. And there I was, just Brian Wexler, divorced, burnt out from a dozen years in Atlanta tech, hoping the only drama I'd see in my grandfather's cabin in Sparrow Hollow would be a raccoon fight under the porch. But if peace and quiet were what I wanted, I'd clearly come to the wrong place at the wrong time. That cabin was a little slice of wilderness, 40 minutes from anywhere, just pine trees, spotty internet, and a mile of dirt road before you saw another soul. Built by my great-granddad, fixed up in the 70s, the kind of place folks from the city pay out the nose to get rustic for a week. The place needed work, a leaky roof, floorboards that sang more than I do in the shower, and windows that could turn a summer breeze into a tornado. But I had peace, quiet, and for a while a family of raccoons that ran my unofficial welcome committee. That's all I wanted. Judith Renner, though, she wanted a kingdom. Sycamore Dunes popped up down the road like a pastel rash, all cookie-cutter houses, lawns, clipped to 2.25 inches mailboxes from an approved vendor that charged more for compliance than a used car. And Judith, in her sensible heels and neon tracksuit, ruled over it like some HOA Napoleon. If Nancy Grace and Miranda Priestley ever had a kid and raised her on a diet of bylaws, that was Judith. My first run-in with her should have been a warning. She rolled up on a so-called boundary walk with 2 board members in tow, clipboard in hand, squint so sharp you'd think she could cut glass with it. She was standing 50 feet into my property, ranting to her followers about my cabin being a blight, accusing me of lowering property values in a neighborhood that technically didn't even include my side of the trees. When I tried to explain politely that my land was never under her jurisdiction, she laughed, waved her hand like she was mapping out the Roman Empire, and claimed all Sycamore Dunes vicinity fell under her protective oversight. You know what I mean? Some people never met a boundary they didn't want to cross. Of course, I figured, all right, she'd stomp off gossip about the hermit in the woods and leave me alone. But I underestimated her. The mail started first. Letters, fines, violations for excessive natural landscaping. Which is just what happens when you let nature do its thing for a century. Unauthorized structures my granddad's shed built before she was born. Non-compliant, mailbox, weathered wood, never seen paint. Fines for grass over 3 inches, never mind I didn't have a lawn. Warnings about my unapproved fence. I never had a fence. Even a glossy pamphlet. So you accidentally became a member of an HOA, as if property rights were a board game she could win with the right roll. And then she started the drive-bys. Pearl white Lincoln Navigator rolling down my road like the Queen's carriage, taking pictures of my truck, my chimney, even my trash cans. She brought props, a surveyor's wheel, a tripod paint samples, even bags of HOA-approved mulch left on my porch. One morning, I woke up to a forest of little flags stuck all over my yard. 73 of them, marking violations like it was a demilitarized zone. For a guy who just wanted to watch deer from his porch and fix up an old cabin, I felt like I'd landed in a Twilight Zone episode called Attack of the Suburban Czar. It didn't stop there. About a month in, she sent a drone black quadcopter camera, red light, blinking like the eye of Sauron, hovering outside my windows at 6:30 every morning, catching me in my underwear documenting exhibits for her imaginary court. I saw her one day hiding in the bushes with a remote trying to fish her drone out of a pine tree with a pool skimmer duct taped to a broom handle. When I shouted if she needed help, the drone shot up like a bat out of hell, and her car peeled out, leaving gravel in the air. She vanished for 3 days, but I knew I was only in the eye of the storm. Her masterpiece was the community prayer vigil for aesthetic restoration. I came home to a circle of HOA members at the end of my driveway holding hands, while Judith summoned the spirit of proper landscaping to drive out my aesthetic violence. She brought sage bundles the size of baseball bats, folding tables, even a donation box for her so-called restoration fund, which, shocker, nobody put a dime in. She finished by smudging my property with sage until the wind blew the smoke back in her face, and half her followers retreated coughing to their SUVs. Then came the compliance intervention, Judith and her minions showing up at my door with a PowerPoint demanding to come in and educate me about the glory of structured living. She actually stuck her foot in the door like some telemarketer from 1952. It took me walking them to their cars while she shouted statistics about mailbox heights and happiness ratings to get them gone. Her letters got more creative: fake law firms, legal threats, even case numbers that spelled out paint shed. I started keeping everything in my crazy file, figured I'd need it someday. But I still thought maybe, just maybe, she'd find a new target. Then she went public. Created a Facebook group, Citizens Against Cabin Chaos, posted blurry photos with red circles and captions like hostile architecture alert. My favorite was a side-by-side of my cabin and a crack house caption, which is worse for property values. Her following was 12 people, most just there for the spectacle. But she wasn't done. She went door to door with a petition to expand HOA authority to any property visible from any current HOA member's property, including with binoculars or telescopes. She got 30 signatures. Most just wanted her off their porch, and presented it at a county meeting using phrases like aesthetic terrorism and visual pollution with a straight face. The county board thanked her and moved on. But Judith took that as encouragement, showing up at every meeting with new evidence of my crimes, once even citing an episode of Judge Judy as legal precedent for her so-called homestead boundary integration. That was the twist the day she tried to file a fake deed claiming my property as Sycamore Dunes Collective Trust, complete with forged signatures like John property owner and Jane Landeller. The notary seal was no joke, drawn in magic marker. The county clerk, old buddy of mine from high school, called laughing so hard he could barely breathe. He started a special entertainment folder for Judith's nonsense. Still, she kept ramping up code enforcement, fire marshal, animal control over my raccoon family, who she claimed were criminal accomplices. Every official in the county had a Judith file. The sheriff's office started calling it another Code Judith whenever her calls came in. But that was just the sideshow. Behind the scenes, I started digging, and man, did I find dirt. Turns out Judith's HOA wasn't just overbearing, it was crooked. She'd been running illegal enhancement pledges, double taxing residents, funneling cash into her own accounts, filling the board with relatives, fining people for everything from bird feeders to sidewalk chalk. The treasurer had quit after 40 grand went missing, and I got the resignation letter from his wife. I talked to neighbors, Bob Martinez, Sarah Kim, the Hendersons. They'd all been harassed and fined, scared to speak up until they saw I wouldn't back down. We met at my cabin, swapped stories, gathered evidence, built a file so thick it'd make a prosecutor's day. The final straw was catching Judith red-handed on my trail cam, trespassing, spray painting my trees, even trying to install cameras on my property in the dead of night dressed in black like a ninja from the suburbs. I mailed every resident and board member the evidence, financial records, fake documents, surveillance footage. I called a town hall meeting and let the whole community see the truth. The fallout was nuclear. Residents stood up, told their stories, board members resigned on the spot. Judith spiraled, filing restraining orders, Facebook rants, even accusing me of being a secret anti-HOA operative. But the real hammer came when Sheriff Bradshaw announced criminal charges: fraud, embezzlement, harassment. Forensic accountants found Judith had siphoned off nearly $120,000 run enhancement pledges like a personal slush fund, paid herself and her family for services that never happened. Lawsuits piled up by the HOA, by residents, even by the county. In court, Judith showed up in a power suit, demanded to be called regional land matron, tried to file countersuits in Comic Sans. Her defense: that as HOA president, her word was law. She rambled about aesthetic insurgents and anti-suburban conspiracies, blamed her crimes on a cosmic battle for property values. The jury found her guilty on 23 counts in under an hour. She got 5 years, 500 hours community service, ordered to pay $800,000 in damages and restitution, banned for life from any HOA or regulatory authority. Her house, her Lincoln Navigator, everything she'd bought with stolen funds was auctioned off. Her husband filed for divorce the next day, citing mental cruelty and excessive bylaws in personal life. Sycamore Dunes voted to disband the HOA, trimmed their rules to 10 common sense pages, and threw a block party with chalk drawings, unauthorized tomatoes, and decorations that would have given Judith a heart attack. The raccoons on my porch became minor celebrities. People came by just to take photos. And me, I put one of Judith's violation notices in a frame, hung it on the wall like a war trophy, and went back to living how I wanted: unpainted shutters, wild yard, my grandfather's cabin standing free among the pines. The legend of pulling a Judith lives on, and the county passed a new law, the Renner Reform Act, banning HOAs from ever pulling that kind of stunt again. Every so often I get a letter forwarded from the prison, her court-ordered apology, always with a note about my shutters not matching. I laugh, sip my coffee, and let the raccoons handle security. The lesson: sometimes the only thing crazier than letting a bully run wild is letting them believe they're the law. Stand up, speak out, and never underestimate the power of a stubborn property owner with a good story and a better sense of humor. So what do you think, folks? Is there such a thing as too much authority in a neighborhood, or do we need a little order to keep the peace? Drop your stories, your wins, your nightmares. In the comments, I want to hear if you've ever faced a suburban tyrant or beat one at their own game. Let's talk justice. Let's talk freedom. And here's to the unregulated, the unpainted, and the truly free.